First, I just love the simplicity of being able to use the word part. Every kid knows what that means, and so talking about our own parts, when I'm talking about my own parts to my children, I just use that language. There's a part of me who. There's a part of me that. There's a part that I need to just take a moment with. And I was so tickled because they inherently got it from the time they were tiny, from the time before they had words, they got it. So I think the way that I talk about my parts is just simply that. I just name it as this is a part, or I might name it as something inside of me that needs my attention. And they get that. And so that kind of leads to how we talk to them about their parts in that same simple way. I love, whether it's working with my own kids, whether it's working with other kids, is when I see a part, very obviously a part show up. I love the use of surprise, like, what part was that just showed up? And it's an invitation. Now it's not a tisk, it's not scorn, it's not judgment. It's like, oh, I really want to know about that part. That part sounds like it really knows how to get big. That sounds like it really knows how to protect you, how to take care of things, or how to be silly, or whatever it's doing. So I love to just name it in that playful way and let them know it's not a bad thing. It's really so vital. It's going to help you the rest of your life. If kids don't want to talk about it, sometimes I'll invite them to act it out a little more. Like, what if that part that just showed up took over everything? And I just got to give looks, or stomp around the room, or giggle or jump, or whatever it may be. And this is probably more often happens in my office setting, because it's like there's bubbles, there's sand, there's toys, like you could let a part do whatever it wants to do. And that freedom that the child feels, whether it's at home, whether it's in the office, of there's nothing wrong with this part. It's actually doing something for me. I can get curious about it. I can embody it. Again, I get, as a mom, I'm not walking around with my sand tray in my pocket or anything like that, but the idea of use what you got. If you're walking through this store and you feel that kid stomping their feet, they don't want to be there, play with them with it. Like, whoa, there's something that does not want to be here. Go through the racks or do what we need to do. And so I'd like to invite them to play with it. I like to also, just in my own parenting, point out my kids are at a really fun age now where they're watching movies that I like. And so being able to either pause the movie or walk out of the theater and say, like, do you have a part that's like that Thor? Do you have a part that's like that, Venom, whatever the part is? And it's externalized enough that it's not so much like, Mom, stop asking me about my parts. It's like, oh yeah, I have that one, that Wonder Woman part. Like, I want the lasso. So
I think it's really important to talk to your kids about your parts so that they can understand theirs. My son talks to me about his parts constantly. He thinks he taught me about parts. And I think it's because I'm so verbal about mine. Mommy's having a rough day. Mommy is, I think it's important to model what it looks like, what emotional regulation looks like, what it looks like to not suppress your feelings, to actually have them because you're human, and then know how to manage, or not necessarily manage, because we know that's a protector, right? But to explore your emotions, that it's okay to have them and express them, and it can be really healthy.
I think it goes, the way we can help children talk about their own parts and help them understand our parts is, one, by being connected with our own system. So in order for us to be connected with our children, we also have to be self-connected. And so as we're able to stay more connected to our parts and model speaking for them, that's the same, thing that I'm doing when I'm teaching parents how to reflect their child, is that we're modeling it, but we're also speaking for our parts when they get triggered and owning them, and then checking in and saying, what part came up for you when, whatever happened, or what was it like for you when I lost my cool with you, and just having the conversation. So a lot of it is just about staying in conversation with our children, and that's what builds and strengthens that, cable of connection that I mentioned earlier. So projecting our exile fears onto our children is a really common human natural thing for us to do. An example that I can think of is that I remember when I was in middle school, I had a friend group that kind of broke up and some friends that betrayed me. And my daughter had the exact same thing happen. And so when I saw that happening to her, it was triggering this junior high kid inside of me that wanted to go kill the other girls, that wanted to really let them have it. And that wasn't going to serve my daughter. And so I had to sit and work with my parts about what did I need back then that I didn't get, what would have been helpful for me. And had I had a mother who was aware of what was going on and who was connected with me and able to sit down and kind of help support me through that process, it would have been very empowering. And so that's what I was then able to do with my daughter. So I think, exiles are going to get triggered inside of us that we may not even remember or know that they're there. And that's why being present to our own process as we're parenting is so important. And knowing when we've been triggered and when this is coming from, when what we're saying to our children or the way we're responding to their experience is more about us than it is about them. And we all do it, to different degrees. It's human nature.
Well, so one of the most beautiful gifts of that, I believe, is that it recognizes we all have exiles. Everybody has exiles. Everybody has protectors. And very often we just grew up in an environment where those exiles had to be pushed down. Those protectors had to show up to survive. And very often we don't even know those exiles are there. So we're going along, we're parenting, that baby starts crying uncontrollably, and up pops my own exile of, I'm not enough. I can't handle this. So our exiles arrive precisely when we're parenting, because parenting is such a vulnerable adventure and path that we're following, and there's no guidelines that say, if you do it this way, everything will turn out all right. And so my experience is that our exiles pop up and immediately call upon our protectors to either shove them back down or lose control. And parenting, while we have control, we are not in control. We are not in control, which might not be very conventional to say. The exile that I am holding said, this is what you need to do in order to be loved. You need to perform. You need to be the best. You need to not make mistakes. Lots of perfection and shaming messages. And part of that might come out in the way of, well, one of the things that I do to stay lovable is I make everybody happy. And now I have a child who is doing something that maybe is not making everybody happy. And I might just jump right in because my exiles are thinking, oh, my child's going to be ostracized, not going to be loved. I'm not parenting him well. I'm not parenting her well. Because a good mom would have already fixed this up. So I think that our exiles could jump out ahead of us and land on our kids, like directly land on our kids. My part that needed to be perfect is now telling my child, you need to be perfect. And again, I think that some of those legacy burdens tie in here, in that there's sometimes just that subtlety of, I notice my child is anxious. And all of my own parts start swarming around, oh, I grew up in a house that was anxious. I grew up in a chaotic environment, and I need to squash this immediately. And so I don't allow for my child just to have his part. It's just a part. And teach him that it's just a part. We can love it. We can take care of it. We can unburden it.
Wir können davon ausgehen, dass Kinder, die sich in irgendeiner Weise auffällig verhalten, überfordert sind oder in Not. Kein Kind ist von Haus aus feindselig oder aggressiv. Es entwickelt Aggression als Strategie, um aus einer Notsituation herauszukommen. Um dem Kind helfen zu können, müssen wir erstmal herausfinden, womit es überfordert ist oder was ihm fehlt. Und dazu ist die IFS-Methode sehr gut geeignet. Wenn man Kindern nicht einen Stempel aufdrückt, indem man sagt, du bist so aggressiv, du bist faul, du bist so ein Schisser, sondern es vielleicht so ausdrückt, da gibt es wohl einen Teil in dir, der wird schnell wütend, der ist schnell erschöpft oder der ist sehr vorsichtig. Dann ist allein diese Sichtweise für das Kind schon so entlastend und auch für alle, die mit diesen Kindern umgehen. Das Kind kann lernen, mit diesem Teil zu kommunizieren, seine gute Absicht herauszufinden und es schließlich besänftigen. Und die Eltern können ihr Kind dabei unterstützen, dass dieser Teil nicht immer mit ihm durchgeht. Denn er hat ja schlimme Nebenwirkungen. Zum Beispiel ein Kind, das aggressiv reagiert, das bekommt zwar die ersehnte Aufmerksamkeit, aber meist nur zu dem hohen Preis von Schelte oder gar Schlägen.
A lot of parenting is about modeling because they're watching us, and what we do is way more important than what we say. And they know, like I said, they're great intuitors, and children know when we're not being honest, or they know when we're, kind of doing a double standard and not walking the walk, but just talking the talk. So it's about trying to be authentic and connect with your child in an authentic way.
I think for him, like I said, we speak in parts language. Since he was in kindergarten, he recognized that there was parts of him that didn't like to do homework. There were parts of him that get really angry when certain things don't go his way. And he's named some of his parts. He's actually given them names, which is nice. We also watched the movie, what's the movie?
Inside Out.
Inside Out. We watched the Inside Out movie together, and he was able to quickly identify parts because we use the parts language in our home. And it wasn't something that I purposely taught to him. I guess he's seen me, like, again, modeling. Kids learn from our example. They learn from our behavior more than what we say. We think that when we lecture them that they're learning, and it's really what they see that makes the most difference. So he's seen me talk about parts and expressing them and, working through them, and I think that's really helped him to do the same.
So one thing that I think it starts with just reflecting their parts even from infancy. When we learn about how do we interact with an infant, and when there's something called responsive caregiving, like we're responding and caring, and we're responding to their needs and really tuning in and looking to see what they need. And when you see their needs and you see reactions, like say an infant gets angry, maybe you're missing their need. Like you think they're hungry, but they're not hungry. Maybe it's the diaper's wet and you just miss it. And eventually you see them getting into a distress or like kind of a frustration. Even in that moment when they're so young and they don't have language, they are building receptive language, even though they don't have expressive language, because they're listening and taking in, to say, whoa, there's a part of you that's so frustrated right now. And it becomes normalized from the day they're born, that when they have parts that are expressing, and you can tell when somebody's in self because they're calm and curious and playful and open and willing to try new things. But when they're not, you kind of like a parts detector, like, oh, there's something in there that's up. And I'm not going to always, maybe for an infant I might say that, but as you get older, I try to steer away from naming the part, like, oh, you have this part, because that's like, I don't get to tell you who your parts are. But I will say, it seems like you might have a part that's angry with me right now. Is that right? I think as a parent, it's really easy for our fears to come forward. Like, we're afraid something's going to happen to them. They won't be okay. They won't be healthy. And I think that our exiles fully believe that these fears are valid, of their own fears. So if an exile feels that it's not lovable, if it feels like the world is going to come crashing down, or if it feels like people won't like us, then oftentimes if we're letting ourselves be blended, or even if that part is in the lead, we're going to be teaching our children how to avoid that. And in the teaching of how to avoid feeling like I feel, we're creating space for that fear to exist. We're almost saying, like, be careful of Like you mentioned a couple stories, right? That is dangerous, but I'm not giving you an explanation. So it's just like, that's dangerous. So I might say, be careful of, my daughter was terrified that she was going to get stolen because I contributed to this. I had some deep fear that I will lose this love, like this child will be gone. And like almost for me, I have a lot of parts that didn't feel fully loved, like fully engaged love. And then you have this child and like, you gotta be careful because those parts are like, now I have it. You have to be more, yes, I do, but I need to be in self with that, not that those parts lead my parenting. But that part could be so scared of losing this love that I could be like, honey, when you go, you gotta look for people. And if you see a car coming, you need to turn around and walk the other way. And like, you don't, wait for me, don't go outside, like wait inside and I'll come pick you up. My daughter she's terrified of being kidnapped. So my own fears of losing love from, like I've totally projected that to her. And so we just operate from the fear. Like for instance, I could come to you and say, if I assume you're mad at me, I could probably get you to be mad at me. Because I'm going to create all the conditions of that you're already mad at me, like acting weird around you, like Dereck, hey, like, and then eventually you become mad at me because I've set that up. And I think we do that with our kids. Like we're trying to protect them so much that we create the environment that's all they have to do is step into it, and they take on our fears. And it also, fear typically means there's something unsafe here. It's not stable. So we're transferring unsafety. You're not safe. And I think our job is, my job is to help you feel safe. And my job is to teach you about precautions of the world. But my main message is trust people, trust the world. This is what you do when something funny like when you feel a funny feeling, that's all you need to know. Like when you feel something's not just right, listen to that, and you'll if you're in self, or if you feel that there's wisdom there, right? So I don't have to tell you that somebody's going to take you and somebody's going to throw you in the back of their van, all that kind of stuff that my parts are freaking out about.
What we're calling self-led parenting really is mostly about doing our own work inside of us and catching the parts of us that are being reactive and extreme with our kids. So those would include things like yelling and otherwise losing your temper, being physical, using shaming tactics, humiliation, and other modes of social control that we were subjected to. So the antidote to these things and a way of getting to that state of self-leadership is through being curious. And just wondering why I'm reacting the way I'm reacting, being curious about how our child is reacting, also being aware of their developmental stage and maybe having a little knowledge of child psychology, human development, because people do go through different stages as they grow, and children go through stages very quickly. And it's a lot of times very confusing to parents when they have a child who thinks and behaves one way that they're used to, and then all of a sudden they wake up one morning and the child has made some sort of transformation in their sleep. And they don't know this child, and they think that the child's Strephorix or something. When really what they're doing is they're expressing their hormonal shifts. So I think that it's a real paradigm shift to think of parenting in this way, and that it's something that is not easy to learn on your own. I think, first of all, having a therapist who can help you and help your family kind of communicate in a more self-led way using the IFS model is kind of an approach that's available right now. Another approach would be to have self-led parenting learning opportunities, such as parenting classes based on IFS, training pediatricians in the IFS model, and other caregivers that interface with families. Children are very resilient, and if they carry a lot of self-energy, they actually are very sensitive to picking up the parts of their parents that are being reactive. If a child has exposure to enough adults that have self-energy, that can provide them with reality testing when people's parts become extreme toward them, then they don't necessarily take it in as a personal wounding, and they don't pick up the experience as a burden. So, you know, these kind of experiences that children have from adults that might be even shaming or punishing don't necessarily provide a traumatic impact. I think repeated exposure to the same message without the message being mitigated somehow, then it does become encoded in belief systems that our parts carry.